Good Thursday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock and time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Plenty of Browns to talk about. OTAs going on in Berea. And some news of guys that are visiting Berea. Running back Darrell Henderson, formerly of the Rams, a free agent visiting with the Browns yesterday. Along those lines, Henderson is a guy who has played 4 years in the NFL with the Rams. 1,742 career rushing yards, 13 career rushing touchdowns, 66 catches, 474 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. Again, a guy that's never been the full-time guy. The Rams decided to go Cam Akers and allowed him to reach free agency. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. And Quincy, Henderson is a guy, it's an intriguing name. As your third running back, probably be pretty good. Can catch the ball a little bit, can do some things.
Yeah. If you went down to just Jerome Ford and him, you wouldn't feel like it's a disaster, right? And it's hard to get to that point at running back, but he's one of those guys who could be out there and do a great deal for this team. I mean, there's always going to be guys available. You know, Phillip Lindsay is a guy who's always like on that list of dudes you would just call up. For a while, it was Devonta Foreman that you would call up, or what was his name? He used to play in Atlanta. There's a number of these guys, but he would be on that list of, hey, if you brought him in, you know that he could get a good amount of carries and be decently productive with it as long as the offensive line were able to do their job. And
that's one of the reasons that Andrew Berry and the Browns aren't necessarily in any hurry to add to that running back room, if you will. This is kind of interesting. CBS Sports, burning questions for each AFC North team for the Browns. Will Cleveland's offensive gamble pay off? There were rumblings that Jimmy Haslam wanted to go from run-first offense to an aerial attack during Watson's first full season in Cleveland. Based on their personnel moves, it appears that Haslam will get his wish. Quincy, I don't know if it's Jimmy Haslam. I mean, it's like...
That's a weird way to frame that.
The NFL is a pass-first league. It's just kind of the way it is.
They traded for Deshaun Watson. I don't think Jimmy Haslam was the one sitting there like, we got to use him more. Like, I feel like that was a group decision. That people came to at the end of the season there. And they only really had to come to that because he only played 6 games last year after being suspended and having a 700-day hiatus from the NFL. Like, the second you traded for Deshaun Watson, this is what was going to happen. Like, it was either going to happen at the beginning of next year or the last year or this year, but it was going to happen. So, yeah. Now, the question of the gamble, will it pay off? We don't know yet. It looks like it might. Like, Deshaun looks good in OTAs. I've seen a lot of quarterbacks look good in OTAs. But if it does, then not only do you have that to lean on, you have a good passing attack, and then you have Myles Garrett on the other side. You have the makings of a very good team. I don't know if I would call it a gamble. Like, we are not betting on anybody who has not been very good in the NFL before, right? Like, that's another thing. We're betting on Deshaun Watson. He's been very good before. We're betting on Amari Cooper. He's been very good before. We're betting on the offensive line that's been very good before. And we're betting on Nick Chubb, who's always been very good. So it's not like these things are wild throws in the dark where we're like, oh, well, maybe DPJ might have 2,000 yards this year or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and, when you think of teams that are run first, there aren't a lot that come to mind. I mean, are there? The league is a passing league. I guess you could say the 49ers.
And they've been trying their hardest not to be pass
right.
First. And every team that is pass will run first.
The Titans, they don't have a quarterback. Yeah. That's why you're a run-first team.
That's what I'm saying. Every team that's run first is trying desperately to not be run first, right? What have the Titans done the last 2 years? Drafted quarterbacks. Tells you what you need to know, right? The same thing with the 49ers. They would draft the quarterbacks. They traded 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance. They would love to not have to run the ball as much as they do, right? Like, it's just there's a clear ceiling on how far you can go in the modern NFL when you only run the ball. And what was the last run-heavy only team to win win the Super Bowl. Like, we could go quarterbacks that weren't that good that won it, but even then, you go Nick Foles. He was good that playoff run. He just never played like that again. Joe Flacco was good that playoff run. He just never played like that again. You got to go all the way back to Trent Dilfer, and we're not even talking about a run-heavy offense because that was a no-heavy offense. They did nothing good on that offense. Okay, like it's been a very long time since a run-dominant team has won the Super Bowl, and that's not a coincidence.
You know what? It's kind of interesting. You mentioned 3 first-round picks to take Trey Lance, and then you take a guy in the 7th round who's Mr. Irrelevant, who's going to end up being your quarterback. Think about that one as far as draft capital goes.
I talk about it all the time. We are so quick to point out, oh, the Russell Wilson trade, oh, the Deshaun Watson trade. Trey Lance might not be on the team anymore. And we don't talk about this. Winning, that's what it proves, Dave. Winning masks everything. Yep. Because they won, nobody cares. Yep. If they had gone 4 wins over it, we'd be talking about them as the biggest disaster ever. How could you do this? And John Lynch is a terrible GM. But hey, they lucked out. They're able to win games. Somebody gave them Christian McCaffrey. So they're able to do this. But yeah, they should be more scrutinized for the Trey Lance pick. It's not working out. But at the end of the day, people understand, you got to get a quarterback.
Right. That's the bottom line. You either have a quarterback or you're always trying to get one. Along those lines, Browns signed Jordan Akins. He played with the Texans and Deshaun Watson for several years. He knows what Watson does well and what Browns fans will see when Watson's playing up to his capabilities.
Great rhythm throws, deep ball throw. He's great at that. The defense, he's really good at it. He can read defense, pick apart defense. Whether we get the mismatches, he'll find the mismatches. And also whenever he seems like he's surrounded, he's going down. Some way he pops out. So you got to stay on your feet, stay moving downfield, and be ready to make a play at all times.
Last year when he was playing in those 6 games, there was kind of an education between the other 10 that were playing with him and him playing with them. Sometimes they didn't know what he was doing.
Got you.
You would. Is that a process that they're going to have to marry together?
It depends. I mean, we're here now. We're trying to overcome that right now. That's what OTA is for. Trying to get the rhythm down. We're trying to get the way he plays the game. And luckily, I've been with him for 3 years, so I kind of know how to maneuver when he makes certain moves. But as a team, I think we'll be fine. Like I say, Deshaun, he will find the open guy, and we will make plays for him.
And Quincy, that's a guy that has seen him at the top of his game, and it will be interesting to see how big of a role he has, especially in the red zone. That's going to end up being a guy that's kind of Deshaun's security blanket, I think.
Yeah, he's going to be kind of like how Rashard Higgins was for Baker Mayfield, where he would just come out there and just get like a couple clutch 10-yard receptions a game, and you feel like he had 100, but he really had like 30, but that's fine. That's where you want him to be. And he mentioned something interesting, right, where it's like, when you look at Deshaun Watson, it makes no sense that he's as hard to tackle as he is, because he just slides out of tackles, like not in the way that somebody athletic would, but in the way that you would expect like Josh Allen to break out of these tackles. So I think that's another adjustment, right? Because people look at Deshaun Watson, they might see the tape, but it's hard for you to get that in your mind that, oh, he's not going to go down on the first hit, because he doesn't look like one of those dudes who aren't going to go down the first hit. You look at Cam Newton and Josh Allen, you'd be like, yeah, he can take a hit. I got to still keep my route going. But when you look at Deshaun Watson, it's like, well, he's probably going to be down, right? Like, they probably got him, but it's never the case.
All right, let me ask you this. Do you think the offense or the defense is more likely to struggle early in 2023 for the Browns?
Oh, 100% the offense is more likely, right? The defense, like, they haven't changed that much. They're still in the 4-3 setup. They're still going to be running some of the similar concepts, a lot of 1 high, a lot of 3 high looks, some 2 high mixed in there. So nothing fundamental has changed for them, right? It's just simplifying what was complicated and putting it more in man and getting out wider and maybe overloading and having a better guiding hand there. Offensively, this is a change, right? Like, this is a big change that they're going to, from wide zone to kind of spreading it out a little bit more. And then also it's going to be a process of figuring out like that balance between what Deshaun likes, what Kevin likes and what Alex Van Pelt likes, right? There's going to be a balance there that those guys are going to have to work out during the season to figure out what they like to go to. Because, for an example, right, for 3rd and 2, whenever I watch the Pittsburgh Steelers, I know for a fact what they're going to run on 3rd and 2 because they've run the same play on 3rd and 2 for like 10 years because Ben was there forever, right? They run the mesh underneath, they throw it to Juju or whoever's the big slot, and they try to get the first down that way through yet. The Browns don't have that, right? They don't have that built-up chemistry with each other enough to know that, hey, on these 3rd and short situations, with this kind of a look on this hash, Deshaun's going to want to do this, right? But what does that match up with what Kevin wants to do? Or is Kevin just going to defer? Like, they got to figure out what those dynamics are going to be and how those dynamics can be laid out to benefit the team most. And that's just going to take time. It's not going to look crispy. We're not going to just roll out the gate beating guys by 40. I hope nobody expects that. But it will be a little rough and shaky. Deshaun's still going to be shaking off some rust, right? The regular offseason rust, but rust. So I wouldn't expect this offense to look amazing out the gate, but it's about how you finish more than how you start.
Quincy, Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention a little bit to the defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Greg Cosell from NFL Films talked about the Browns' new additions on defense. This is from the X's and O's podcast with Greg Cosell.
Smith and Tomlinson were really interesting in how they would sort of arc out from the inside to get to the quarterback. So you get 2 ex-Vikings. They get Okoronkwo from the Texans, who's a really underrated edge guy, and they get Siaki Ika in the draft. So that front, I mean, we can talk about the linebackers and the, I think that was more established. To me, it's the combination of what Jim Schwartz does with his lines. It's not a lot of blitz. There's not a lot of variance there. It's wide 9 and, sort of what it is. But all that personnel, I mean, that to me, the more I was watching tape on all these guys, I mean, Siaki Ika has some bad tape, especially last year. But
he's not a pass rusher anyway.
Right. But just as far as redefining this defensive line, I think it's kind of an undertold story that the Browns went all out here.
Well, Zadarius Smith is a really good edge pass rusher.
Yes.
And so he'll play opposite Garrett because Jadeveon Clowney is not a good edge pass rusher, and he never has been, and that's why he's going to be with his 5th or 6th team before the age of 30.
Smith, though, and this is where Okoronkwo comes in, is that you can bring Smith. He had a game against, I think it was the Lions when he was at the Packers. He had 3.5 sacks, and I think 2.5 were from the inside.
And Quincy, again, people want to lump Zadarius Smith in with Jadeveon Clowney. They're really different players.
Greg Cosell, what did Jadeveon Clowney do to you? Oh my goodness, did you hear that? Like, he went so far that he had to about that. He could have just said, yeah, it's an upgrade for Jadeveon Clowney. He went, no, Jadeveon Clowney ain't never been good. He'll never be good. He ain't never been good as y'all thought. And that's why he on like 8 teams, he trash. Like, that's crazy. What did y'all say about Jadeveon Clowney to this man to drive him to that point? I blame the internet for that. But yes, Greg Cosell's obvious dislike of Jadeveon Clowney aside, and he's not completely wrong about some of that. I think he does have some value as an edge rusher. He said he wasn't even a good edge rusher. That's crazy. But I think Zadarius Smith is an upgrade from Jadeveon Clowney for sure, right? When you look at the pressure numbers, and I don't think Miles has ever played with anybody who gets the amount of pressure that Zadarius gets on a regular basis. That's going to be interesting to see how does that affect his sack numbers, right? Because all the time, what do we see? Dudes running away from Miles Garrett, which means that's a pressure, right? What happens when you run away from the guy that's on the other side of Miles Garrett? What happens? I don't know. We've never really seen that happen. So that's going to be interesting to see how that affects his numbers. But yes, from a pressure standpoint, that's very important. Jadeveon Clowney just never was a high pressure, high sack number guy.
Yeah, and even when he did get pressure and win rate, he didn't finish at quarter. You know, the sack numbers were light because he would not finish and get the sacks. How do you think Jim Schwartz can take advantage of the Browns' talent? And I know you've answered this on your podcast as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be allowing these guys just to do what they're naturally good at. Instead of trying to have these guys fit into certain boxes, allow Denzel Ward to follow guys, right? Empower these players. When you have a less talented team, you probably want to empower your players less and give them less responsibility because you don't have the type of players to where you can do that. But what didn't make sense to me was that the Browns have a very expensive defensive roster and a very talented defensive roster. Those are the situations to where you can make your life a lot easier by just empowering some of these players to be more of what they're being paid to do, right? So instead of Denzel Ward worrying about one area, he's now worrying about a lot more, but he's capable of handling a lot more. And when you simplify it like that, it makes it so that there's less room for miscommunication, and it makes it so that, hey, the big-time players can show up and make the big-time plays. We'll see what happens, but I think that's the main thing is like putting these players and empowering these players who are good to be good, right, and not rely on any crutch or any training wheels anymore.
Yeah, and you know, guys have strengths and weaknesses. Play to their strengths. We make it sound like it's, you know, earth-shattering. That's what coaching is. Hey, this guy does this well. Let's have him do this. He doesn't do this.
That's when your job is easy, right? Like, how did Urban Meyer win 3 national championships? It's not because Urban Meyer is an X's and O's genius. It's because he was able to get the best players and be like, I can play man. Like, you know what I mean? Right. Like, that's all he had to do. Nobody could stop the guys that he had on the field, right? Kirby Smart. Did we think Kirby Smart was a genius before the last 2 years? No. It's just because he has the biggest guys in the world playing football for him on the defensive line. And he's like, I could just put 5 in the box and live with it, right? When you have the horses, the strategy matters less. When you're out there trying to run the 2017 Browns to 6 wins, this is why we give Mike Tomlin a lot of credit, because he be running dudes out there we've never heard of and getting good defense out of them, right? And that's when you need to get more complicated and try to figure out ways to hide things and shell things. But when you are good, you don't have to disguise much, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, their playbook is not a secret. We know what they're going to run like 90% of the time. It doesn't matter because they have Pat Mahomes, right? Like, you need to be complicated and hide things. It's like basketball. And hiding things and trying to get overcomplicated, that's like trying to be crafty in the post. You only really got to do that when you can't jump over dudes and dunk on them, right? And the Browns have a roster to where they should be able to jump over dudes and dunk on them. But instead, the last 2 years, we've been trying to, you know, do post moves and try to pass the ball 8 times. Just shoot. You know, that's all we need to do on defense. Just shoot.
Yep, I'm with you. What about a secret weapon? Again, I know you've addressed this. What do you think the defense's secret weapon is?
Well, I was talking about Rodney McLeod, my bad. And I think he's an interesting piece here, right? Because he's kind of insurance on Grant Delpit. But if Grant Delpit's able to play at the level he is, then you can do some interesting stuff to where you can put Ronnie McLeod back there at the other strong safety, have Juan Thornhill as free safety, and then move, Grant Delpit inside to like a sub linebacker to where he could do what he did last year, was do a lot of those run stops. He's kind of the piece that we wanted Ronnie Harrison to be, where Ronnie Harrison was going to enable the Browns to be real creative with how they use their safeties and linebackers. He's a better version of that. He's a more proven version of that, and they got him for much cheaper. So he's somebody I'm think is going to play a bigger role than I think a lot of people assume.
This is also kind of interesting. So this is from CBSSports.com. Likelihood of each defense becoming a top 10 unit in 2023. And these are the bottom half of the defenses in the league. So they say the Browns are in the possibly, so they could possibly go from one of the bottom defenses to a top 10 unit. Browns are along with Panthers, Packers, Jaguars, Chiefs, Chargers, Dolphins, Saints, Seahawks, Commanders. Browns have had the top-end talent to be an elite defense for a while, but haven't been able to put the pieces together. Myles Garrett remains, joined by Dalvin Tomlinson, Zadarius Smith up front. Can the cornerback trio finally coalesce into a special group? And see what we were just saying previously. Don't ask them to do things. You don't have to get tricky when you have talent, and they have talent in that back half.
Right, you don't got to get crafty when you can just dunk. Right, like Giannis don't got to go behind the back, inside out, and learn how to do a step back. Why? Because he could just power everybody and slam it. Like it's basically that, right? That's what they're trying to do on defense. They're starting to be like, hey, we have Denzel Ward. We could just have him follow who's inside instead of having to try to shift things and try to kick things around. And look, let's be real. The fact that the Browns are even in the conversation with can be a top 10 defense, given what we saw from them last year, says a lot about what they did this offseason. Like, says a ton.
I agree.
Because top 10 would not be where I would put this defense unless we're talking about most embarrassing performances in the run game all time. Because that's what that Buffalo game was. Like, they put up some all-time bad tape.
Yeah. Buffalo. What about Atlanta? Atlanta ran the ball 11 times in a row.
See, Atlanta was like, okay, you were just worn down personnel-wise. You know what I mean? Like, you guys got hurt. Miles didn't play in that game. I don't think Jadeveon played in that game. If Miles didn't play, Jadeveon definitely didn't play, even though he was mad about the whole situation, right, with the whole sack stuff. But then you get to that Bills game, dog. Everybody was healthy. You just got out the way. Like, that's if they're lucky, NFL Films and Howard Cosell are not around today to do the old cut-ups that they used to do, because they would have had some fun with how elegantly the Browns are just getting moved out the way. And this is the Buffalo Bills, who everybody thinks stinks at running the ball and protecting the quarterback, that we're doing this team. This was Devin Singletary. Like, at least the Atlanta Falcons try to run the ball. Like, they come from the same dude that brought you Derrick Henry. We got pushed and bullied by the Buffalo Bills, whose best running back is Josh Allen, who doesn't run the ball that much anymore. Like, no, that was I don't know how it got that bad, but it got so bad. Like, the Buffalo Bills could not believe it. That's why they didn't run the ball in the first half. They're like, no way that happens all game. And then it just did.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention to some of the skill position players. Sports for CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Jordan Vanek from the 33rdteam.com. Those are former NFL player executive types, talking about which wide receiver he thinks could have a career year.
The guy that I have for the career year is Amari Cooper. He's coming off the highest amount of targets that he's had in his career. Now he gets a full offseason with Deshaun Watson. They've added Cedric Tillman. They've added Elijah Moore. They added a lot of players to that receiver room, and they want to throw the ball. They want to do it. They have Nick Chubb back there, so teams have to give them single high. They have to load the box. And when they do, Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson are going to make them pay. Deshaun Watson showed plenty of, I'm getting DeAndre Hopkins the ball. I think that's the case here for Amari Cooper.
And Quincy, the other thing is we found out, in the offseason, Amari Cooper wasn't healthy when he was playing with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I hear that's kind of always the case with Amari Cooper, that he's always playing kind of hurt, but never really like fully healthy. So it's probably going to pop up at some point this year. He's going to have an injury, but he was really good with Deshaun Watson. He was really good with everybody last year. I think it's so underrated how good Amari Cooper was last year. He almost had a career year last year, and I think he did in touchdowns. So I wouldn't be surprised if he matched, if not topped that a little bit more when you have the dynamic quarterback play of Deshaun Watson back there, if he's playing up to the level that we expect him to. So, yeah, I would have to agree there.
All right. Jordan Akins, tight end, who had played with Deshaun Watson in Texas, talked about why he signed with the Browns and if Watson being here had a factor in it.
Just the chemistry that we had. I want to pick up where we left off in Houston. And, the team camaraderie, me and Deshaun, we had great chemistry, like I said. And I like the way he plays the game. The play is always alive when he's on the field. And, I love to play with a quarterback like that.
He seems to, especially in the red zone, he has a knack for finding the tight end. What is that? Where does that come from in your mind?
I think it's just his awareness and his belief in his tight ends. He trusts us as we trust him. And like I said, the play's never dead with Deshaun. So, a big body, sometimes it's easier to bump and get open in the red zone. And when we do, Deshaun ends up finding us.
Did he being here influence your decision to come here?
Yes, I can say yes to that. And honestly, I just was looking, to be somewhere that I was wanted and had great team camaraderie. And, when I got here, when I came and visit here, it was a perfect fit for me. And, like I said, I'm reunited with Deshaun, and that's a good thing for me.
Quincy, we've talked and you've said pretty consistently, Watson likes guys that go up and make the 50-50 ball catches. Akins is one of those. Tillman's another one.
Yeah, he likes to let his athletes make plays on the football, right? He trusts his guys. He's one of those guys who feels like in order to play the position effectively, you kind of have to have an element of trust with your wide receivers to trust that they're going to come down and get things. And that's what happened with DeAndre Hopkins. It even happened with dudes like Chad Hansen in Houston, right? So he's going to trust his guys and he's going to empower his guys to be able to get up there and make plays. Is what he wants to do. And Jordan Akins is one of those guys who has, understand that trust, and he's hoping to cash in on that.
So Pro Football Focus ranked the top 32 running backs, and they ranked Nick Chubb number 1. Chubb takes top honor here for his consistency. He's never posted a rushing grade below 80. Most recent grade, 90.7, 2022 was a career high. He regularly forces missed tackles at the highest rates in the NFL and ranks near the top in yards per carry average. And the fact that the Browns are going to throw the ball more, I don't think it's going to hurt his. He might not get as many carries. He's going to be more efficient in the carries because you're not going to be able to load the box the way they're going to play.
And it might not be Nick Chubb that sacrifices the carries, right? I think that's also somewhere where it's like, hey, we forget. My man Kareem Hunt's not here anymore, right? That was part of the reason why we didn't give a lot of carries to Nick Chubb, despite being one of the top running teams when it came to rush attempts, was because Nick Chubb was splitting carries with somebody. Now he's going to probably get a similar amount of carries. I wouldn't be surprised if he got more carries than he did last year. And that's basically because he's just taking a higher percentage of those snaps. And as the offseason goes by, if they're not really trying to have anybody else back there to split carries with them, kind of proves my point where it's like, hey, they're just going to expect them to take a higher yield of the load, but the load's going to be the same.
The other thing is he's not going to get beat up as much because in theory, you're not going to be running into 9-man boxes like he was last year.
Mm-hmm. It's like when the workplace get automated and they're like, hey, it only takes 2 people to work this. It's going to be so much easier for us 4 to work this job. And the boss man comes around and says, well, now 2 people work here. That's what's happening with the running back room. Nick Chubb's just taking more to load.
All right. NFL's most underappreciated players for each team, NFL.com. For the Browns, Ethan Posick. Posick's offensive grade, 78.9, third best among centers per PFF. Computer vision shows his lateral movement after the snap, that is, the speed with which he moved to his left or his right after snapping the ball, third best among centers last season. They measure everything, which is amazing, but you could see what the eye test shows you is he was out pulling as a center, which is kind of remarkable.
Hey, it's remarkable what some of these guys are able to do. Like when you see like how fast and how well some of these Browns offensive linemen move. And again, this is part of like, hey, Posick's in a position where he can be very empowered because he's just asked to kind of play the center role and not really worry about much else because to the left he has Joe Bitonio and to the right he has Wyatt Teller. So, I mean, there's a reason why they decided not only are they going to keep Ethan Posick, but they're going to bring in somebody in the draft who reminds them of Ethan Posick. They feel like that's a good combination for the future of this offensive line.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. How much of the Browns roster has been turned over and where does it rank relative to what is expected across the NFL? Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. This is from Pro Football Focus, NFL player return rankings. So 2021, the Browns ranked third. They returned 81.13% of their roster from 2020. Last year, 2022, Browns returned 60.38% of their roster, tied for 23rd. Quincy, you look at this year's roster, and I think it's going to be turned over even more than it was a season ago. When you look at the turnover rate, how many new guys do you think will end up being on this roster?
Probably higher, right?
Yeah, I would think.
Because the whole defensive line outside of Myles Garrett is new. Linebacker, that might stay the same, but as somebody pointed out, they're all 3 coming back. I think Tyvis pointed this out to me. They're all 3 coming back from injury, right? Which is an important thing to note because, like, we don't know who's going to come back looking right. So that's something. Tony Fields might start. That's going to be different, right? Safety, that's going to be new. Ronnie McLeod can end up starting in there. That'd also be new. And then I think corner, we're talking about like a handful of positions in that wide receiver. It's only an argument of semantics, but when we look at the snap count, we might say Elijah Moore might be the second highest in snap count when it comes to wide receivers too, right? So it's just going to be a lot of turnover. Look, one thing Andrew Berry has shown himself not to be afraid to do is adjust the formula, right? Like, okay, this did not work. Let me bring in some new pieces and see if this is what we need. We cannot say that the Browns have not been successful in large part in the Andrew Berry area because Andrew Berry ain't tried nothing, right? We've been trying.
Yeah, you just got to get it done on the field. So this is from the Bleacher Report. NFL coaches on the hot seat before the 2023 season starts. They say Kevin Stefanski. If Stefanski fails with this group, the team will likely be forced to go in a different direction in the offseason. Given the Browns' lack of salary cap flexibility, not having a first-round pick again in 2024, a coaching change would be the most sensible path forward. I don't know that he's on the hot seat, but yeah, at some point you got to win. If you don't win in the NFL, you don't have the job as a head coach for very long.
Expectations are high, right? And it's not like last year where you also had high expectations, but it was just really high excitement because you brought in a new quarterback. This is different. This is expectations are high. The team should win a lot. Team doesn't win a lot, somebody's got to go. And look, they already ran through some coordinators. It's probably going to be you next, right? If not you, Van Pelt. But somebody's going to have to go if the offensive side of the ball does not live up to expectations, and that's what gets everybody. Even the jobs with the highest job security in the field, usually those dudes lose those jobs because of expectation, right? Nick Saban is a great example of this. Nick Saban, nobody feels like he can get fired. He walks past his statue on his way to work. But Dave, if he loses 2 games this year, he's going to get fired. Like, that's what the expectations are. Being on the hot seat is there's a direct relationship to the expectations your teams have. If somebody is expecting not to be abjectly garbage and you're garbage this year, you're going to get fired, even if your team isn't expected to be a playoff contender, right? Like, the expectations matter in this sport more than anything in any other sport, and you will get fired because those expectations are high and the output is low.
Who do you think, if I was going to ask you, who do you think has a breakout season? Who on the Browns, and you can give me a couple, who do you think has breakout seasons?
A breakout. David Njoku, I think, is an interesting one to think about, right? Because he's in a situation where he's going to be asked to be spread out a little bit more. He's not going to have to do as much inline blocking, which means he might stay healthier throughout the year. He's going to be asked to kind of stretch, get downfield, make some explosive plays, maybe adjust to Deshaun Watson. Like, he's the one that I can see really benefits. And then if you add another big body in the red zone package, now he's not getting doubled, so he can have more opportunities to be that Travis Kelce-like guy. It's no secret that Deshaun Watson thinks of himself as somebody on that level with Pat Mahomes. And hey, we know how David Njoku thinks about himself. He thinks highly of himself. I wouldn't be surprised if he thought of himself as a Travis Kelce level player, and this might be their year to prove it. Another guy, Deshaun Watson, obviously he has to be in the conversation for a breakout, even though I don't know what a breakout year would be for a guy who's almost had 5,000 passing yards in the NFL. But, he would have to get close to that. Probably like a 40 touchdown, 10 interception season would be considered a breakout for him, or at least a break back in, right? I think that's a fair term, right? A break back in for him. And then who else? JOK. I think he's primed for a breakout. They finally have the situation at the defensive line figured out. So he's not going to be worried about guards getting to his chest, getting to a second level, all these things he had to worry about last year. I think mentally he's going to be in a much better place. Physically, he's going to be in a much better place. Hopefully Anthony Walker can stay healthy. Hopefully these other dudes can stay healthy around him. Also going to be asked to, be able to freelance a little bit more, do what makes him special, use those instincts that he has. And I think in combination with that, the better pass rusher we're getting from Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, and the fact that I think the corners are going to be better because they're being in better situations for themselves, I think he's somebody who's going to benefit a lot from that. Yeah,
I'm curious to see what Jim Schwartz does with JOK as well. So it could be really interesting. Before I let you go, and I know you've addressed this on one of your podcasts as well, who do you think's in danger of being cut? Who has to fight and scrape and claw to get on the 53?
Ooh, there are a couple guys, right? I think Nick Harris is somebody who's interesting because I just don't see the path for him to make the team. We saw when he had to play guard, it was kind of a disaster. They drafted they signed Ethan Posick, and then they got Luke Whippler. So there's your backup center. I just don't know what the future is for a guy like Nick Harris. The obvious one is Anthony Schwartz. Again, another guy who has a diminished role. Jakeem Grant is another guy you kind of forget is still on the team, but he has a much diminished role than what they were going to ask him to do. Both those guys were asked to be home run hitters and deep ball guys, but I think they replaced both of them. Marquise Goodwin probably replaced Jakeem Grant, and I think Elijah Moore was clearly the replacement for Anthony Schwartz. So you're moving on from both of those guys. and both of their roles have been filled. Another guy's Demetric Felton, right? Like, he's going to be asked to move back to running back. He's had a tumultuous position change career where he's going from one position back to another position. And, he's never really been able to find a home. And I just don't know if he fits what they need there, because, yes, he's a good receiver, and theoretically you could look at that and think he's a good third down back. But running backs that can't run, I don't care how good they can run routes, they're usually not useful. You know what I mean? Like, tons of running backs in college that can run routes, but not a lot of them can be good third down backs. And that's the issue that he's ran into.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you, Dave. Quincy
Carrier, make sure you check him out. Always really good Brown stuff, untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out on the side of the break. We continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Bill Barnwell from ESPN.com ranked the best 2023 NFL off seasons, and he ranks the Browns number 19, so in the lower half of the league. And the rationale, I'm not sure they got the right players. Zadarius Smith looked like a steal when he racked up 9.5 sacks over the Vikings' first 9 games last season, but managed only a half sack over the rest of the campaign. High risk, high reward trade for the Browns, even if they didn't give up much draft capital in the process. Also, wasn't crazy about the trade for Elijah Moore. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily. And Casey, if you don't like the trade, I get it, but they addressed a lot of needs, and I think 19 is awfully low. That's bottom half of the league.
Yeah, I'm all the way out on this take by Barnwell, and there's a lot of ways you could go, but let's start where he's right. So Zadarius started 2022 on a tear. I mean, just 9 sacks, 50 pressures inside the first 9 games. Has an ankle injury, and then his production slumps. He had 1 sack. But in that same time span, he had 28 pressures. Buddy, let me tell you, if the Browns could have got 28 pressures by someone not named Myles Garrett, well, the defensive side of the ball looks much different. And as far as like the compensation, that's a nothing burger. They swap fifths for a 6th and a 7th down the line to go get a 1A guy to pair up with their generational pass rusher. Like, you make that trade 10 times out of 10. if you want to poke holes in how the Browns have built their roster, take your shots. But I wouldn't look at Zadarius Smith to be the one to prove your point.
Yeah, and the Moore one is another one. The other thing is those pressures are probably more than everybody else on the defensive line when he's playing on in essence, one leg.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though he only got one sack out of that, that would have resulted in 3 or 4 more sacks for Miles had you been able to generate those pressures. So yeah, to me, that was a no-brainer. Getting Zadarius Smith was a home run.
Yeah, and again, we'll see. It's just interesting that perspective exists out there. Pro Football Focus ranked the top 32 NFL wide receivers. Amari Cooper checks in at 22. Cooper made every offense he steps into better, yet the discussion about Cooper tends to center too often on his deficiencies. Receiver who's good at everything. Cooper is an excellent weapon whose only real issue is consistency. And the other thing to keep in mind, he was injured last year and he continued to play, core muscle injury, which that's brutal for a wide receiver.
Yeah, still produced. I must be missing all these conversations centering around Amari Cooper's deficiencies. I don't know what water cooler they're happening at, but they're not in my vicinity. He's the definition of a professional. He's a salesman of a route runner. He's excellent at the catch point. He's in his consistency is what I would point to. He's going to be where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. And there's a ton of really good wide receivers in the league. So I don't even think calling him the 22nd is a slight. I would have him ranked higher. I'd have him as a top 15. But I know one thing. He's a legitimate number one. He's not a number 2 masquerading as a number 1. He's a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. And if you're one of those, you're one of the best players on the planet.
The other thing is we had talked about this a little bit earlier. Watson's a guy that he's going to feed him. I think DeAndre Hopkins. Watson is going to feed Amari Cooper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what this whole offseason is going to be about, developing chemistry and being able to hit the regular season on a sprint, and especially with Amari, coming into the season healthy like that, I expect them to hook up early and often. I don't know if he's going to, score more touchdowns because that's a variance thing, but I would assume he's going to see more targets than he saw last year. And last year he saw a career high in targets.
All right, this is from Warren Sharp's football. Quarterback tiers for the rest of their career. So at the top, the tier S for star, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. Tier A, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. Tier B, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Justin Fields, and Anthony Richardson. I can't argue with the top 3. I'm still not sold on Trevor Lawrence. I know he had a great year, and he gets graded on a curve because he had Urban Meyer for a year. But I guess where Watson is it's reasonably fair. I think people tend to not realize how young Deshaun Watson is.
Yeah, I don't think this is Warren Sharp's best work. I take exception to a few things. Jalen Hurts being that top 3, he had a great season last year.
Yeah.
But one season isn't a career. I think that there's going to be a big adjustment to the way defenses approach, not just him, but Philadelphia in general. And if he's able to counterpunch and show he's still that elite guy, even after everything changes around him, I could, give him his accolades. But I would put Burrow in that top tier pretty comfortably with Allen and Mahomes. And I'm with you. I don't think Trevor needs to be elevated to that point yet. And then you look at that tier with Watson and Lamar, you got a rookie in there who hasn't even taken a snap.
Yeah.
Being put in the same tier as a Lamar Jackson and a Deshaun Watson. To me, that's laughable.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure on Kyler Murray yet either. That's so again. I agree with you on Burrow. I think Burrow should be up there as well. But the tiers and all that leads me to this: how good does Deshaun Watson have to be for the Browns to be what they want to be, which is a legitimate contender?
Yeah, it just depends on what the definition of successful would be. For me, that's you have to minimum make the postseason and make some noise in the playoffs, winning a minimum of a game. And if that's my definition of success, then what Baker did in 2020 would constitute, right? So 3,500 yards, 62% completion percentage, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, But bear in mind, if Deshaun plays the full season, those would be his worst stats yet.
Right.
So I expect him to be much better than that. I think the bigger question is how much success would Deshaun have to have on the field for him to actually get credit for it? I think that if he could throw for 4,600 yards and 38 touchdowns, and he wouldn't even be in the MVP conversation as long as there was just one other player with those kind of numbers. I think they'll automatically get it. So it's skewed for me.
I think if he's borderline top 10, I think they are legitimate AFC championship game contenders.
Oh, no doubt that this roster is built like that. And if he's able just to be the engine that drives it, that this should be an 11-12 win team. Point blank. And anything less than that would be a failure.
And that's not him getting back to the level in 2020, because back to the level in 2020 is, top 5.
Yeah, MVP conversations, if he's able to get to that.
I think people tend to forget he made 3 straight Pro Bowls, being Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, by the time he was 26. Yeah, and like you said, people forget how young he is, and I think the next step's inevitable. I think it's just a matter of time. I think everyone's kind of this mind frame that he is who those last 6 games were, not the first 50. The larger sample size, that's what I would point to. I think Water finds this level, and I wholly expect him to be back there this year.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily. Greg Cosell, film breakdown guy for NFL Films, talking about some of the Browns' young defensive linemen.
They drafted a kid from Missouri in the 4th round, Isaiah McGuire, and I think he fits this as well. He looks the part. He's 6'4", 272, long arms. I mean, he fits the part. He ate up the Georgia left tackle who the Steelers took in the 1st round. He just ate him up. Yeah. So that he could play meaningful snaps as well. I think the other player who's really interesting along their defensive front on the inside is Perion Winfrey, because he came out of Oklahoma last year as a 4th round pick, Doug, and he's actually an athletic kid. I'm curious to see, because Dalvin Tomlinson is not going to play in their sub fronts, not on 3rd down. Dalvin Tomlinson's a very good player for what he is, as you well know, but he's not going to play in their sub fronts on 3rd down.
And Casey, I'm really curious to see how a number of these younger defensive linemen play with. Keep in mind, Jim Schwartz is a guy that's used to getting production from 7, 8, 9 defensive linemen. So Alex Wright, Perion Winfrey, McGuire. I think there's going to be a natural growth and evolution just because he's going to say, okay, you do this well. That's all we're going to ask you to do.
Yeah, I think you brought up Alex Wright's name, and I think that's interesting because we're finally going to get to see him in the role that he was brought here to do originally. He just got thrown into the fire as a rookie. You're going to get to see him play 20% of the snaps, keep him fresher. They're probably going to move him around a little bit, give him some inside looks. Both the Isaiahs, Thomas and McGuire, there's going to be a healthy rotation. I do challenge what Cosell said. I think that you will see Dalvin Tomlinson on some of the sub packages on 3rd down. he's got some really good underrated pass rush moves. I don't think that the Browns are going to shy away from using him in that way. I think if they do sub him out, it's just going to be give him a breather, not because he can't rush the passer. I think that I don't know who you would put in his place, to be honest with you, at this point. But this is another point. Perron Winfrey, I think that coming up the new coaching staff, he's going to have the slate wiped clean going into it. And if he just shows he's able to get after the quarterback, there's going to be a place for him on this team. Schwartz isn't going to penalize him for what he did under past regimes. He's going to judge him what he does when he gets there. And like you said, he likes to play 8-9 players when he can, and all healthy bodies need to be on deck. And if you can do it, man, you're going to have a role in this team.
Who are you most anxious to see how Jim Schwartz uses?
Probably Za'Darius. I think he's the mover. I think you can stand him up and stand him in the A gap. You can play him down at a 4-eye or a 3 technique or out wide. I think he's going to be that chess piece that kind of moves around and finds a weak link to kind of let Miles go wild, And unlike a defensive end they had last year, he's not going to turn down assignments. He's not going to say, "Oh no, I'm not going to go in this week." He'll be the guy that he'll jump on the grenade.
I am also anxious to see what he does with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That there's so much versatility there that I think he's probably going, I can do it. And now he's been in the league a couple of years, so you can ask him and put more on his plate.
JOK is a player with a skill set and an athleticism that can be weaponized. Kind of been waiting on it to happen since he got here. Understandable what happened for him as a rookie. But yeah, year 3, you got a defensive coordinator that has seen it all, and he's called it all. And I don't know if he's had a linebacker quite like JOK yet, so it is going to be very interesting to see how he is deployed in this defense.
Ross Tucker from the 33rdteam.com, ranking all 32 of the NFL head coaches. He goes, Andy Reid 1, Bill Belichick 2, Mike Tomlin 3. Hard to argue with that. He has Kevin Stefanski at 23. Head coaching record, 26-24, with Deshaun Watson eligible to play the whole year. Stefanski better make sure Browns owner Jimmy Haslam starts to get return on that absurd investment, or Haslam will try to find someone else who can. You are what your record says you are, so 26-24. Hasn't had a normal offseason, so I'm kind of hoping for a boring, normal offseason for Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, so far so good. Not too exciting. I'd like to touch on that one thing, though. He called it an absurd investment. Aren't there 4 other quarterbacks that are going to make more than Deshaun this year? People need to get off that baked-in narrative. And he's right, though. 23rd, okay. But this will be the season for which Kevin Stefanski is judged, because all the bases have been covered. Everything is in place. He's not dealing with some tumultuous off-season thing. He's going to have all of his pieces. So he's going to be judged off this year. And if they get through this season and it doesn't swing the way they need it to swing, it would be okay to, just kind of examine whether a change in leadership is what's necessary to get this team to the next level. But it's kind of hard to judge him on the things that he's already done and put him, on one of the lower tiers. This is a guy who won Coach of the Year his first year in the league.
Right.
That doesn't happen to bums typically. I would assume that he could, and he doesn't need to be top 8. If he's top 15 and the players play to their level, that's just fine by me.
Well, and so that was with a quarterback who played pretty much the entire season. Then his quarterback busted up his shoulder. Then you had a quarterback that was suspended for the first 11 games. We have already said it's the most important position in sport, and you're kind of patchworking together a season.
Yeah, he had to basically had to go through 2 different seasons, and I don't know what they planned to do with Watson when he came back, but it didn't start off right. So I think they just kind of reverted back to what they knew, what their players already knew, and try to just play it safe, keep it simple. Well, they're having an entire offseason right now to change things up and be more dynamic and implement more things that Deshaun Watson does better into his game. We'll just see how if does it come together or does it not, Is Stefanski capable of calling a game for a player of Watson's caliber, or is he just always comfortable with those backup type quarterbacks because he's more in control, because he's going to have to relinquish a lot of control to Watson if this thing is going to get to where it needs to go.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see that. The other thing is about that contract. People keep making a big deal about the guaranteed in it. You know, it's $230 million guaranteed. Nobody looks to get out of a quarterback's contract when the quarterback is playing well. So what they were saying is, we know this is the quarterback we want. How do we get him? We have to guarantee the contract. The guaranteed contract was means to get him to come here.
Yeah, they pushed all their chips onto the table, you know, and they're in this with Deshaun. They're in the boat, and if it sinks, it all sinks for everybody. Yeah. Watson, quarterbacks of his age and his caliber don't come along. They don't come free. You don't see them. They're locked down under contract for those exact reasons. The fact that he was available, they moved heaven and earth to get him. Well, now they got him, and now they have to make it work. You know, people being mad about the $230 million being guaranteed is laughable to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know what? A lot of the season is going to be dependent on how well Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson get on the same page and make this offense work.
Yeah, and it's all going to be under a microscope, so it's going to be blown up. Probably blown out of proportion many times, you know, good and bad. So, you know, buckle up. It's going to be a heck of a ride.
Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Hey, anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out, Dog Pound Daily. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.